Dans le biopic Back to Black, Marisa Abela incarne Amy Winehouse, la chanteuse britannique partie trop tôt. Elle nous raconte sa transformation pour devenir la diva de la soul, des coiffures au costume en passant par les tatouages, et ses sessions d'enregistrement dans les studios mythiques d'Abbey Road.
I was a fan of her music, but I was quite young while she was sort of current on the scene. I was a fan of the music, how it sounded, of the melodies, and of like hearing it and singing along with my friends, but I don't think I ever really fully understood like the depth of her talent as a songwriter.
Me and my head high.
You know, anyone can close their eyes and hear Amy's music and say, like, that's Amy Winehouse, no matter what song she's singing. But as a writer, you know, I don't think you can understand Some Unholy War or Wake Up Alone or Love is a Losing Game or even Tears Dry on Their Own or Back to Black as a 12-year-old girl. You just can't understand what that must be. I booked the job about 4 months before we started filming, and I'd been auditioning for another 3 months, and I sort of, even from the first audition process, I was prepping as if I already had the job. It's not something you can wing, you know, it's not something you just do off the cuff. So I was working for a long time. Technically, there were singing lessons, there was a physical transformation, there were, you know, mannerisms and movements that and facial expressions that I needed to get down. If I was going to do this, I wanted this portrayal to be about, like, can you feel Amy? Do you understand the essence of her? Does it give you an insight into what drove her objectives in life, her wants and desires and cravings, and what made her laugh and cry, and what made the people around her fall in love with her?
I don't write songs to be famous. I write songs because I don't know what I'd do if I didn't.
That was the important thing to tap into. I'm not a hair and makeup artist. I knew that the film would have that in spades when we actually got to filming, but my job as an actor was to embody her and permeate her from the inside out. There's also a journey. There's Amy at 17 and then all the way through to 27, and you need to be able to map that change. So it was a real process of watching, you know, every documentary, every interview, listening to radio interviews, reading biographies about her, meeting her family and friends and talking about, you know, what she was like. I sang with her band and I got so much insight into what she was like as a colleague, you know, which is interesting. And then there's the other side of things, which is like, what is the emotional truth here? When is she afraid? How does she mask that? When does she not mask that? When does she feel things? When does that feeling turn into anger or humor or pain or, you know? And I think that psychological truth and that emotional truth is what changes something from being an impersonation of a thing into a real, you know, deep dive into into the sort of humanity of a person. Yeah. I did about 2 hours of singing a day for 4 months with my singing teacher, and that was sort of in lessons, and then I was just constantly listening to Amy's references, Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, Dinah Washington, Lauryn Hill, and I think that just kind of permeates and you start to have a different sort of vocal language, as well as all of that technical training.
Some other tires grip, cause I'm not gonna meet your mother.
But the reason that I really wanted to sing was because this was, you know, this was Amy's chosen mode of expression. Our film was using the songs to demonstrate where she was at certain moments in her life. So Sam always says that, like, you know, you can't pick up Stronger Than Me and put it at the end, and you can't pick up Back to Black and put it right at the beginning.
I go back to us.
Her story goes through this music, so we need to hear it when we hear it. So I felt that I needed to be able to tell the emotional story of her life through those songs. And I could do everything else, but then if I was opening my mouth and we were cutting to a studio recording, it didn't make any sense. I needed to be breathless when she was breathless, joyful when she was joyful, you know, all of those things. It needed to be authentic to the emotional story. It was amazing to play with her band, because of the stories, and because of, you know, the way that they feel about the music. No one, I think, would ever put as much heart and soul into it as they did, because the story is so important to them. But also because it was amazing for me to see, like, you know, Amy could have had her choice of session musicians. You know, she could have chosen anyone. These are the people that she wanted to be around. So to get to know them, to laugh with them, to talk with them about the story was incredibly emotional, and it added even more depth of soul to it. You know, I was doing fittings sort of every week because we started filming our movie sort of later on in her life, because I needed to be at my most frail at the beginning and then be able to sort of, you know, put on weight so that we could film the earlier stage of Amy's life later.
Yeah.
So we were doing fittings sort of backwards to how we shot it. So as I was losing weight, we were doing those different costumes. So it was interesting to see my body change over time and how that affected the costumes and what Amy decided to wear. But the costume was incredibly useful for me. You know, you can't have those movements without those high heels, and you can't have the hair without. It changes the way that you move when you have a heavy wig on your head and all of the rest of it. I think a lot of Amy's life became out of her control. I think she was always sort of interested in tattoos, and she always felt like, I don't think feelings felt particularly fleeting for Amy. I think they felt very intense and very permanent and very important. So like, why not get them on your skin? It makes perfect sense to me for her. Also, I think that the more and more other people claim your image as their own, take your photo in the streets every day, and you don't have much power over yourself anymore. So what you do have is what you put, you know, who you choose to be around, what you put into your body and what you put onto your body. And I think it was her way of reclaiming herself and her body and her individuality.
Konbini!